recording.
Trying to get by Benning. Darnell Nurse left it in the corner, gets up center. Perry scores! Corey Perry!
Ilya able to shake away from Solani. It's given away to Solani around in front. Score! Teemu Solani with the steal. Bring the fans want one. Score! Off the floor! On the board! Paul Kariya!
All right. with that, we're back. Is it a week later? How long has it been since our last show? 2 weeks?
I think technically 2 weeks.
2 weeks. Okay. All right. Well, we were supposed to.
This was my first full week back. Yeah.
Yeah, we were supposed to hop on with the draft.
I
show
think we
today, right?
released a week late.
Yeah.
Which
Well,
is what
a
happened.
few days. Yeah, a few days late. Yeah, we recorded on Thursday and then released it like Sunday or something. Luckily, the topics were still fresh, but
Yeah, thank God.
yeah, we were gonna hop on today and do a draft preview show, but we had a little bit of kind of scheduling issues getting the guest that we wanted to get, so we are working on getting that. We still got a ton of time. Draft's not till late July, so we've got plenty of time to get that one out. So instead, we got a few updates. We're going to talk a bit about the Calder Trophy going to Moritz Seider, Mason McTavish, and the Memorial Cup. Just a few brief updates, and then we've got a fun little game we've been scheduling for 3-4 months that we've been trying to get this.
If not longer than that.
Yeah, this is one that's been in the works for a while. But I'll let you explain it because we've been waiting. So
Yeah. So the Ducks have been kind of on. I don't know. I guess a couple of years ago they were on that little run of retiring jerseys. They got Solani, Kariya, and Niedermeyer all pretty quick.
yeah, distracting
Once they got-
us from them being bad, right? So
Yeah, it worked really well. So like other than once they got Solani, who like 100% had to be the first guy to go up.
Yeah.
Then they were able to get the other two in, and so now Anaheim, they have the history and somewhat the success to now kind of have guys that you can start to really think about being like, oh, should they go up in the rafters or and one of the things I think is really interesting about that conversation is how different opinions are about what should or shouldn't count towards someone going up into the rafters for any specific team and having their jersey number retired. And so there's kind of a step down from that, which I think is something that I think you said only one team has an official one, but
yeah. One team has an official Ring of Honor, which is Vancouver. But we were talking before the show, and I can't remember what it's called, but Toronto has something. Like
Wall of Stars or something like that.
Yeah. So they just implemented that though. I think 5 or 6 seasons ago, and you said Montreal probably has something similar as well.
I'm
so
100% sure they have something.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the idea, because I do think the history of franchises is important. I do think that that's something that can help connect people, right? Like watching players pass other players on the way up.
Mm-hmm.
The charts and stuff like that is really cool. And I think I kind of remembering, the guys along the way who kind of made the team better or made the team like a little bit more fun to watch or something, but really never had the like high, like elite and success and impact of someone you're going to retire. Right.
Yeah.
And I just like, I guess you could think of it as like a Ducks Hall of Very Good almost. But the way that I kind of described it to you when you made me actually like explain it was players who had a significant impact either on the success or the history of the team, the culture of the team, things like that. So, you know, Anaheim, like I said, is finally old enough now that some of these guys are interesting. And it's weird that I'm older than an NHL franchise, but that's fine. I'm older than more than one. But yeah, so that was kind of the idea. So we kind of had a couple of different ideas of how to structure it and stuff like that. But I think we ended up just being like, let's just pick a couple of guys and go from there.
Yeah.
But did we want to start with the Calder stuff real quick?
Yeah. We might as well get into that because if we end up recording in a week from now, it's going to be fairly old. So we might as well briefly get into that. But as we kind of expected, like there was an outside shot that maybe Zegras would win because of the flashiness and the the media attention that he got this year. But ultimately, it comes down to the voters, and it was Seider. And I wouldn't say by a landslide, but the majority of the first place votes went to Moritz Seider.
No.
Yeah,
it was a landslide.
Yeah, it wasn't quite the Makar Yossi Norris race. It was, I think it was like 1,800 plus points to Seider. It was like 1,100 or something to Zegras were the final rankings, and then Bunting was a distant third. He got some first place votes probably from the Toronto media, but yeah, like it as much as I would have loved Zegras to win, I think Seider was probably, and we talked about this all year, the guy that should have won and probably the most deserved to win. If Zegras had have won, I don't think it would have been a major shock because I think he still deserved. He was the closest one to beating Seider, but yeah, at the end, I think great season from Trevor Zegras for sure, but Moritz Seider, just what he did as a first-year defenseman with a team like that was unbelievable.
Yeah, so Zegras had 15 first-place votes. Seider had 170 first-place votes. Yeah. And then Bunting, I think, got 7, and then Lucas Raymond got 1, which made me laugh.
First
love
place
Lucas
vote?
Raymond. No, yeah, he got a first place vote, and like again, it's hilarious because it's not any shots at Raymond. It's just Moritz Seider was the runaway favorite for the majority of the season, and there was still one person out there who was like, he's not even the best rookie on his team, and I love it. All love for Lucas Raymond.
Yeah, I'm pulling it up now. I see here. Yeah, so yeah, Zegras had 100 second place votes, so he was the landslide one there. Couple fifth place votes for Zegras.
Fuck you, Toronto. Yeah. But no, so yeah, I think everything you said is right. I think the role that Seider stepped into on that team is a hard role for anyone to fill, and to see him do it at such a young age and have the kind of success or impact, I guess, is a better way to phrase it, that he did was remarkable. And me and you talked about this and stuff, as far as like there were plenty of other rookies who had meaningful contributions. Cole Caulfield got his season turned around once St. Louis came on board and really poured it in at the end. Matt Boldy came down for a minute there at the end for Minnesota and had a huge impact. Anton Lundell was the third line center on the President's Trophy team as a rookie.
Yeah.
Like there were, Jeremy Swayman was the number 1 goalie for Boston, which was a playoff team. Like, it is not nothing, the number of high quality rookies that are entering the league right now, and specifically that entered the league this year.
Yeah.
I do think that kind of at the end of the day, it did feel like the final 3 was kind of the final 3 that made the most sense in a lot of terms, with Seider, Zegras, and Bunting, right? Because Bunting has a lot of the raw stats. He also has the presence of the market. He's on a good team. He's playing with these great players. He's putting up these numbers. I get the whole he counts, so that's not his fault. But for me, the age thing is a factor. So, but I just think it was great. It was really awesome. I'm really happy for Seider. And, Trevor Zegras, fuck, man. The fact that he got into that conversation, he finished in a very clear second place this year was remarkable. It's like we said, there wasn't a shortage of really good rookies this year. So
yeah, barring the just unbelievable rookie season from a defenseman in Seider, right, Zegras is the clear winner in this conversation, right? If you take Seider out of the equation, I don't think it's any question that Zegras runs away with this and clearly steps away from it with the win. And you just look at the number of second place votes that he had compared to Bunting and Raymond and Swayman, right? Like without Seider there, those are all first place votes, and he ends up winning that likely. So yeah, I mean it's still a great season. You can't argue. The one thing I have, like looking at the list of players who got votes, the Toronto media is wild that Timothy Liljegren got 1 fourth place vote and 3 fifth place votes. I think he played 30 games or something this year, and Jamie Drysdale not even on the list. I don't think Drysdale necessarily deserved votes, but for Timothy Liljegren and Martin Ferraveri to make that list and get 4th and 5th place votes, and for Jamie Drysdale to not get one shout from somebody out there is wild.
That's pretty funny. Yeah, once and hopeful future guest Chris Watkins, Yellow Pinata on Twitter, he was like he did like his whole thing based on his model that he has, and he was saying that Liljegren should have been probably the winner, if not much higher. And I was just like, okay, like Chris is a really, really smart guy. He 100% like the stuff that he says. He always has a logical argument, but I don't always know when he's saying something just to get a rise out of people. Not that we know anybody else like that.
Yeah, not at all.
So, but yeah, like, and again, played the 30 games thing, I think, is what really hurts, because there's only 6 defenders on the team, right, when you're playing a game. Yep. So, like, if you're a rookie defender having a meaningful impact in any way on a competitive team like that, I don't think that can be dismissed. So I don't necessarily have an issue with Liljegren as a thought. The idea that he ended up in the top 5 is a little funny to me because, I have such high praise for Lundell and Boldy.
Yeah.
And even Raymond.
Yeah, it's just like the fact that somebody had him 4th. So over likely, like we just take the top 3 as it is with Seider, Zegras, Bunting. They had Liljegren over Raymond, Swayman, Lundell, Tanner Jeanette, Matt Boldy, Cole Caulfield.
I love it so much.
That's wild.
So, and then the other thing we wanted to talk about was, speaking of Calder trophies.
Yeah, you didn't want to get into that conversation yesterday. Somebody asked you if McTavish could be Calder Trophy next year. I'm not ready
to do it yet. But the young god, Mason McTavish. So, Canadian correspondent Edward Jones, please update the class.
Yeah, well, I think since we last did our show, I don't think the OHL playoffs were over. So Hamilton, Mason McTavish, they won in Game 7. I think McTavish had 2 goals and an assist in that game to win the OHL championship. Hamilton went on to the Memorial Cup, which started 5 days ago, I think, on the 20th. And not a great start. They lost both games, I think. They didn't have any points going into yesterday, so they lost both to Shawinigan and St. John. So there's a round-robin game where everybody plays each team once. You play 3 games. And the first place team with this point standing, they adopted a new one this year. It used to be the regular NHL standing. It was 2 for a win, 1 for overtime loss, 0 for anything else. Now it was 3 for regulation win, 2 for an overtime win, 1 for a overtime loss, and 0 for a regulation loss, I believe is what they did. Anyway, heading into yesterday's game, where it was the last game for Hamilton in the round robin, they played Edmonton. They had 0 points. Edmonton had 2. Shawinigan had 6, and St. John's had 4. So it was a must-win game. They had to win in regulation to avoid a playoff tiebreaker against Edmonton. And they ended up winning in regulation. McTavish scored 2 goals and an assist. I sent you the one-timer from last night. If you haven't seen it, go look up the one-timer that he scored last night. Just unreal. How good.
It's not even a one-timer. It's a half-timer.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's insane, man. He's so good. And, the thing that we've kind of talked about is, like, trying to get an idea of how to temper the expectations of clearly how skilled, how just talented he is. Like, you can see the talent level. Yeah. And then trying to project that into a context right? When his peers are now older, more established NHL players instead of players his own age, or younger who, aren't as physically developed as him and stuff like that. And, we've talked about this. This is something I'm really hoping to get into if we are able to sit down with our guest. But the comparisons to Nick Ritchie are, at this point, I think, just completely baseless.
Yeah, well, they were in the first place, but
sure.
Now
but
they've been obliterated.
I think it's like I get the hesitation given who made the pick, right? So like I agree with you. I didn't necessarily think that was fair to him from the start, but I understood it. And I think seeing him have this level of success and the ways in which he's scoring goals, the plays that he's making, and the success that he's having, I think he's pretty much made that comparison irrelevant, which is a testament to how well he's played in the year since the draft.
Yeah. And watching him in his role with Hamilton is so different from when we watched Nick Ritchie with Peterborough and with Sault Ste. Marie when he was in the OHL, where Nick Ritchie was kind of this just top-line banger forward who had a pretty good shot for junior, but was the recipient of playing with great players, right? He was on the wing of the top line for each team that he was on and was just kind of the main shooting option on that team in junior. With McTavish, in Peterborough, he was the number one center. He played in all situations, penalty kill, power play, you name it. He was the guy out there. He's come to Hamilton and not been given the first line role. They've got a lot of overage forwards, Logan Morrison, Avery Hayes. Those are kind of the two main guys for Hamilton. They make up the top line with one of their younger guys in Ryan Winterton. And McTavish comes in and gets a second line role, becomes a second line center, gets put with some skilled players, but not the top guys on the team. And then you watch any game that they've played in the playoffs, any key moment for this, it's his line. It's him who's out there, or he's been bumped up to that first line. Mm-hmm. And Winterton's been either moved to the blue line to play four forwards, or he's taken him completely off there. Like, the way he's utilized on this team just shows how important he is. He's out there in every key situation, every key face-off. He is the guy that they want on the ice. He's the trigger man, and anytime they need a goal, power play, last couple minutes of a game, if the net's pulled, he's the guy who's they're looking for to shoot the puck, and you can tell why with the goal that he scored last night. And I think he's definitely getting the attention he deserves, but the points aren't the top in the league. He was around the top in the OHL players. I think he finished fifth. Two teammates in front of him, in Hayes and Morris. In the Memorial Cup right now, I think he's sixth and scoring 3 goals and an assist in 3 games. But he's not the main option offensively, right? He's not on the top line. He's getting all these other responsibilities, but he's still producing. And every single goal he scores seems to either be a go-ahead goal, game-tying goal, or the game ends up being the game-winning goal in that situation, like last night's, where that one-timer ended up being the third goal for Hamilton in a 3-2 victory. So it's hard, right, to temper that. 4-2. Yeah, they ended up winning 4-2. But the game-winning goal for McTavish. But yeah, it's so hard to temper your expectations, right, when you watch him dominate like this. So now they're on to the semifinals with that win tonight. They play. I didn't check I think the other game's tonight between St. John and Shawinigan. So whoever
you don't fucking know. Shut
up. They play one of them. More than likely, they play. They play St. John's in the semifinal, and then if they win, they would end up playing Shawinigan in the final. So a couple more games left for McTavish in the year. Hopefully he can go on and win the whole thing. They've got a team that's capable of doing it, but it's been so fun to watch him and think, next year the Ducks could have another player in the Calder conversation with McTavish joining in. He's going to have a lot of other guys that are going to be in the league next year full-time, guys like Owen Power, Kent Johnson. I'm missing a ton of them, but all those.
Matty Beniers.
Yeah, Matty Beniers. So there's going to be another
Brent
tough
Clark
race.
Will probably play enough games.
Yeah, you would think so. Byfield would be in
not
that.
Brent Clark. Ken Johnson, KJ.
Yeah.
In Colorado.
Yeah.
Columbus. Sorry.
I don't think Byfield played enough games, so I think he would be in that conversation again.
Sure. Here's the other thing we have to worry about. Simon Edvinsson is probably going to come over next year.
Yeah.
So
another Detroit defenseman to go up against.
So
that would be tough.
That's a thing.
But yeah. I mean, he has a shot.
Poor Simon, we might have to go full Tanya Harding on that kid.
God, I can't. Yeah. I think it all depends on where he plays next year, right? Is a lot of those other guys could potentially have first or second line opportunities for McTavish. You could pencil him in on the second line right now as the second line center, but it all depends on where they end up wanting to put him, how he looks in his first few games, obviously training camp, preseason, and then the first few games of the NHL season. I think he's going to stick around for sure, but I don't want to get dragged into another Calder race conversation until we're maybe like 20, 30 games into the season and we've seen kind of how he started and where he stacks up against some of these other guys, because it is tough competition to go up against next year.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I'll wait till August. Maybe if we get a little bit of more reports from like rookie camps or something like that, then I'm willing to jump in right away. I just need a month. Just give me a month. A
little break from rolling off the loss
from trying to fight Detroit fans. So, but let's pop into the Ring of Honor.
Yeah. Are we starting with the easiest position in goalie, or where do you want to start?
Let's start at forward. So okay. Who's a forward that you had?
So I wanted to start this with I was going to pick Corey Perry, but then obviously the likelihood is that the next jersey retired after Ryan Getzlaf is his. I feel like he's so borderline, right? Like he should get the jersey retirement, but we know Getzlaf is next. I don't think he's
borderline.
Like, I think he's in, but I just feel like in this conversation, like, we've got Getzlaf who's next. Perry should be the next one after that. So I'm not going to include him in mine.
Like,
yeah.
There's nobody else.
Yeah. So I can't include him because, second all-time in games played and goals, third in points, first in PIMS, 14 years with the Ducks, Hart Trophy, Stanley Cup champion. Like, that's all pedigree to get your name up in the rafters. He's going to be that rank, second, third, first in those categories for the next 10, 15 years until somebody sticks around long enough to pass him. So he has to be up there. So I was going to include him, but then I had to preface that I can't. So
I think he's a borderline lock. Like, yeah. I think it'll happen fairly quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see. I don't know if they would ever do this. I mean, I could see the same thing as Korea and Niedermeyer, where it's in the same season. I was thinking maybe they would do it on the same night, but I don't think they could. They could end up doing that. But
yeah.
Okay, so my actual first guy then is Steve Ruchin. So former Ducks captain. Yeah, former Ducks captain, formed the iconic trio centering Korea, Solani, 10 years with the Ducks. Sits top 10, top 5 in a lot of categories, points, games played over the last over the 10 years that he played with the Ducks. He kind of felt like, outside of obviously Getzlaf and Perry, who are going to have their names put up there as the most standout option among the forwards of a guy who should probably get it. Still every time the Ducks have anything, any jersey retiring, any events or anything, he's the guy that has to come out, right? Like, he's still the guy who ends up always being there. So he kind of felt like the obvious first addition. If you're going to pick any forwards, it would probably be him.
Yeah, no, he was one of my guys. So that's the other thing. We didn't talk about this, and part of it was, just whatever. But the other big part of it that I think was interesting is just to see where we kind of went, because we didn't put any like parameters or anything really, other than kind of like 2-ish forwards, 2-ish defensemen, and a goalie, and then whatever.
Yeah. Then we all have our kind of extras just that we were thinking.
Yeah. Of, so I 100% agree. I think there's an argument to be made that Steve Ruchin should be the second name to go into a Ring of Honor for Anaheim.
Yeah.
I just pulled some of his stats up and stuff, and he played the heart of his career from 1995 to 2004 with Anaheim. He was taken by Anaheim in the auxiliary draft. So he wasn't even in the actual NHL entry draft. He played 616 games, which was 5th in franchise history. He has 153 goals, which is 6th. He has 279 assists, which is 6th, and 432 points, which is 5th.
Yeah.
And he played from, again, 1995 to 2004. My favorite thing about this, he played 10 years 616 games, and he had 140 penalty minutes. That's it.
Yep.
He is 66th all time for Anaheim in penalty minutes.
It's wild. I thought he would have way more.
I assumed he would have way more.
Again, like I don't have too many long-term memories of watching him as a kid because when he was there, I was like 6, 7, 8. But just again, like you would think by looking at the guy, looking at some highlights of his size and the fact that he's playing down the middle between Korea and Solani, that he would be the guy that would probably be the physical side of the things. But no, like somehow a guy at 6'3", 215 didn't put up a ton of penalty minutes. But I guess if you are the main defensive anchor of that line, you probably shouldn't be in the box too much, right?
Yeah,
so,
no, I think that's part of it, right? Is he has to be smart enough to play. Like the person in that role has to be smart enough to play with Solani and Korea, and also be disciplined enough to have their back, because love them both to death. I don't think either of them was playing particularly exceptional defense, and Steve Ruchin really was, just kind of, he was just the brute force on the line. He was the pick it, the do it all, pick everything up kind of guy, and it's been really fun to see him kind of show up every time they do something lately, and to see him still around the organization.
Yeah, his story is just wild too. Again, like I would love to dive a bit more into kind of the supplemental draft and where some of these guys came from and how they got them. But when you look at like the playing history here, the season before the supplemental draft, he's listed as playing at the University of Western Ontario in my hometown in London. Like,
hell yeah,
college or university hockey in Canada. And then all of a sudden he gets drafted in the supplemental draft, plays the next season, half the season with the Gulls, 41 games, and half the season with the Ducks, and then goes on from there to play 600 plus NHL games. Like, you look at the guy who Florida drafted in that draft in front of them, Sean McCann, a defenseman, didn't play a single NHL game, and they drafted him, and he was playing in Harvard, so he was playing in the NCAA at the time. A guy that was drafted right after him, Steve Guola, I think it is, by Ottawa, ended up playing but I think 150 NHL games. And then you go down the list, like the rest of these guys, I don't think they played more than really 100, 150 NHL games if they played at all. So the fact that, like, again, he's playing university hockey in Canada to go 600 plus games with the franchise and center one of probably the most iconic line in Ducks history. It's wild. Like he has to have a name there. He again, like you said, probably the second option, the second most likely guy to get in there, but he would have to be in that Ring of Honor for sure. And I've heard some people talk about and mention his name potentially if the Ducks wanted to push the jersey retirements a little bit, that he could be a guy you could consider. I think it's a bit of a stretch, but you've heard his name in those conversations when fans have kind of been discussing who should get their name up in the rafters, right? So
yeah, I think he presents a really interesting case in that way, because if you want to be that franchise, right, that retires a lot of numbers, that there's 99 numbers, man. Well, 98, right? And then you start taking a couple ones, but there's a lot of numbers, and a lot of guys wearing those numbers are not going to get their jersey retired. So I don't think it's a huge issue. The question just becomes kind of, how do the fans feel about it? What is the franchise trying to make it mean? It's culture questions, right? But I 100% agree.
So I think having this Ring of Honor is so
important,
important and good for an organization to still recognize these guys. And like you had mentioned in kind of the run up for this, to tell the story of the franchise and of guys who had an important, like Ruchin was an important player. He wasn't Korea or Solani, who everybody knows and can go back and look at the stats. Right. But if you didn't grow up with the team in that era, or don't go back and look at it, you wouldn't know that Ruchin was the guy between Korea and Solani and his impact that he had during his 10 years with the Ducks without some sort of recognition of that. If you're going to just go back and dive through, briefly dive through the Ducks stats and look at it, you're not really going to find that unless somebody's written a story on it. So that's, I think it's important for that. And then you don't have to bog down, it's maybe not the best term, but bog down the, the jersey retirements. Cause I think it does get a little bit stretched when you are just retiring guys. And instead of doing that, right?
again, bog down or dilute, right?
Yeah.
But they're not great words, and they feel a little shitty for a guy that obviously we have a ton of,
Yeah.
respect for as a hockey player. But yeah, it's interesting because I think you're 100% right. I do think Richard's a little bit of a stretch, but you can absolutely make the argument if you want to, right? And be like, no, this dude was like one of the most important players of this team for 10 years. Like, that's not nothing. And I think that's totally fair. He had 3 seasons where he finished with Selke votes. They all got progressively worse, 7th, 14th, and 45th. And he had 2 years where he finished 13th and 6th in Lady Byng Trophy. So his name was out there, right? At least amongst, some of the writers, and he was doing enough to get a little bit of acknowledgement via, I think the Selke and the Lady Byng kind of paint a pretty clear picture
Of the type of player that he
what
was, yeah.
the type of player that he was and the role that he was asked to fill. So yeah, I love it, man. I had him. I wasn't 100% sure if you would go that direction. And so, yeah, I agree with you completely. So I will go with my other forward for now.
Okay.
And my guy, one of my favorite Ducks, man, Rob Niedermeyer.
Yep. Yeah, he was on my honorable, my borderline guy. I have him as, yeah.
To me, Rob Niedermeyer is a guy who is never going to get even close to the jersey retirement conversation, right? Like, he just... But again, trying to tell the story of this franchise, right? I looked some of it up, but like, he's traded to Anaheim in March of the 02-03 season, and he goes on the run with them all the way to the Stanley Cup Finals, which proves to be huge because they play the Devils, who on the other side of the ice is Scott Niedermeyer. They are related, actually. He plays 21 games. He gets 3 goals, 7 assists. He's averaging over 23 minutes a night for Anaheim in the playoffs. He had 2 shorties of his 3 goals. 2 of them were shorthanded playoff goals. So, again, they're just extra noticeable, extra impactful. And 06, 07, he played 21 games. He had 5 goals, 5 assists. He was +9, 39 penalty minutes, and he still played 18 and a half minutes a night, man. He was a very meaningful player for the team. He was a big part of why Sammy Paulson was so successful. And I don't mean that to disparage Sammy Paulson, but to point out that Rob Niedermeyer was a very good player in his own right. And him and Sammy Paulson, and then eventually Travis Moen, were able to create that kind of very famous third line, shutdown line for the 07 Cup run. For Rob Niedermeyer, 382 games played, 56 goals, 68 assists, 311 penalty minutes. He had 7 regular season game-winning goals in his career. It's just, I think all of these numbers kind of point to a player that is not legendary, but is memorable.
Yeah.
In a way that if you watched these teams, he's someone that meant something, right? He had the A on those teams, right? You saw Scott Niedermeyer, I think, take it back from Solani to then hand it to Rob or something like that. But he was a meaningful player. He was a leader on the team. He was always one of my favorite players. I always liked the way that he played.
Yeah.
He played a really strong two-way game. He was kind of Jacob Silverberg before Jacob Silverberg, and Rob Niedermeyer was a center, but he did end up moving towards the wing when he had his most success because, again, they had Sammy Paulson.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think that's the thing to remember about this too. Is it's not always about. I mean, he had good stats and longevity and ranked highly in terms of his time with the Ducks. But it is a lot about those kind of other intangible things. Is the leadership that that role he played in the team when they won the Stanley Cup. The whole relationship and set up with him and Scotty and how much that meant to them and how much he meant, I guess, in terms of getting Scotty to that team and them being able to make that run. It's those little things like that and how much fans loved him that also kind of add to this. And that kind of leads into the guy that I had for my second one. I borrowed a little bit from the Vancouver Canucks Ring of Honor, where they had Alex Burrows as their guy, and I had George Peros as my other guy. So just
Man,
again,
I did not see that coming. Let's go. Please
no.
make the case for George Peros.
I mean, if you ask a lot of people outside of Korea, Solani, Getzlaf, Perry, who their favorite player was, I think a lot of people have George Peros in either as their number one or in their top three. But he did have a significant impact on this team. Again, 356 games played in Anaheim, Stanley Cup champion. Offensively, he's never been, the big impact guy. He had that role to play as the enforcer on this team during that period of time.
He almost had a hat trick against Florida, so you be careful over there.
I did not put his points and goals and assists in this for a reason. But third in franchise history with PIMS with 812 in only 356 games, and the only reason he's third is because Getzlaf and Perry played 1,900 plus games with the organization, and Perry had like 1,100 PIMS and Getzlaf had, I think, just under 1,000. So a few more seasons for George, and he would have been top of that list for sure. But I think I weighed up the options of somebody like him or Stu Grimson and those types of guys, just because again the role they play is not the prettiest role, but it is, and especially at that time, was an important role to have a guy like that on the team. He's a fan favorite, everybody loves him. Was great in the community with the Ducks. He's just one of those guys that kind of did the right things when he was with the organization. And again, statistically, he didn't have a big impact on the Ducks winning the Stanley Cup, but I do still think he was a big part of that team, and in the role he played on that team. So I think he was kind of a nice little shout. I think outside of Ruchin, there was a lot of other guys I considered, but I think just because of how much he meant to a lot of people on that team and to the fans at that time, he kind of just squeaked in above some of the other guys.
Yeah, shit, man. I mean, like, I have one Ducks jersey with a player on the back. It's George Peros.
Yeah.
He was, for that run, he was my favorite player, right? Like, Getz has always been my favorite player. He's, huge like that. But, like, of the other guys, Peros was always my guy. Like, I loved watching him out there, man. He had the whole thing with, I think it was Bugard.
Yeah.
In the playoffs and, like, just, all sorts of fun stuff. Like, it was just a blast.
He had some tough guys he had to go up against in that run. Chris Neal would have been in Ottawa, I think, at that time, I believe.
Yeah, Chris Neal, that would have been I'm pretty sure he got the back end of Brashear.
Yeah.
You're looking at Fedoruk, Jared Bowl. They would have overlapped. Who are some of the other big guys? You've got Ryan Reeves was around back then for sure.
Yeah, I'm trying to think, like, in that cup run, who he would have had to go against. Who could be on that team, but like,
actually,
he was the main guy
Ducks
for
enforcer.
that. I mean, like,
Absolutely.
listen, they were a heavy team. There was a lot of guys on there who could do that. I mean, Rob wasn't a big guy, but he still would be engaged physically. You had Moen on that team, who was another guy who could step up and get things done. But it was George who was the guy that, if there was another heavyweight on the other team, it was going to be George. It was going to be Peros who fought him, right? Like, that was going to be the guy you go against.
Right.
So they played Minnesota, so it'd be 06-07 Wild, and then Vancouver, Detroit, and then Ottawa. Just trying to think of who he went up against. I think Bugard would have been with the Minnesota Wild at that time.
Yeah.
So he definitely.
But still, even just in general, all around that area, you know what I mean?
Yeah, Bugard for sure. He had 120 PIMs that year, so he was definitely a guy.
Let's see real quick. I'm on hockeyfights.com trying to goof around. All right, let's see. His 06.
Bieksa was with the Canucks. Bieksa and Burrows were guys he would have had to go against in that series. Who we just talked about with Burrows and the Vancouver Canucks Ring of Honor.
All right, here's his 06-07 fight card. Scott Parker, Cam Jansen, Darren McCarty, Radis Ivanens, Darcy Hordachuk, Donald Brashear, Andre Waugh, Robin Regier, Jody Shelley. Yeah, Jody Shelley was a bad
one.
man. Matt Walker, Eric Goddard, Scott Parker, Jesus, Darcy Horchuk, Zach Stortini, David Kosey, DJ King. Yeah. That would have, he was around with like Konopka, who was one of the best middleweights when he was playing.
Yeah. The Sens also had Brian McGrattan at that time too, apparently. So
big bad boy.
That would have been tough. But I think for a lot of reasons he kind of fits what you're looking for with this type of Ring of Honor. Honored for his role and what he did for that role and how important that role was at that time. So.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's a really, really good pick, and I think you're 100% right. The only really other person you can kind of put in there with him would be Stu Grimson, who is one of the greats at the role, right?
Yeah. I think the cup is what maybe shifted, and then the standing and all time in PIMS and games played and everything kind of shifted a little bit.
I don't think Stu Grimson is most known for his time in Anaheim, where obviously Peros is.
Yeah, exactly.
So no, man, I love that pick. That's a great pick. So now I'm gonna make my second forward choice, and this is going to be this is an interesting choice because there's a reason that they can't retire this person's number, but there's also a reason that they should be just under that line, right? Like they're right at the edge.
Yeah.
And I think it has to be said. I think you got to put Bobby Ryan in the Ring of Honor. I think that's the guy you got to go with. He was, to your credit, or to your point earlier, he was the other guy on what is at least the second most iconic line in Ducks history. You know what I mean? That big RPG line that just had heavy game where they played that cycle and they would just take over games and just eat time, and it was, again, Bobby Ryan was not small, 6'2", 210. Like, he had that wonderful power move down the left-hand side. He had the huge stick. He had meaningful games. He had the hat trick against Jonathan Quick where he made Pat Sajak cry. He has the moment like where he scores with Mikko Koivu's stick up in Minnesota.
Yeah. The move, the double Dika in against Nashville.
Yep.
He's got the moments, right? So
he has the moments. He's got the totals, man. Like, for Anaheim, he had 147 goals and 142 assists in 378 games.
Yeah. I'm sure if you look at points per game, he's got to be top 5 or probably 5th or 6th, right? So,
let's see.
Because I would imagine like it's Getzlaf, Perry, Solani, and Korea, and then probably Bobby is right in and around that.
So Bobby Ryan is 7th all-time in goals. He's 12th all-time in assists, 12th all-time in assists. I did not hit points like I thought. But 9th in points. Oh, excuse me. I'm so sorry. Somehow he ended up finishing his career plus 40, 251 penalty minutes, 180 even strength goals, 15 game-winning goals, averaged almost 18 minutes a night.
He was 7th in all-time points per game. But I would really put him probably 5th because the two guys in front of him played 30 games and 85 games. So Fedorov was 5th with where is it? Hold on, .776 points per game in 85 games.
He rocked, dude. Sergei Fedorov.
And then Kip Miller played 30 games and had 23 points. So his 767 points per game was .002 higher than Bobby Ryan's .765. But I would say then Bobby Ryan is 5th, and it's Paul, Teemu, Getzlaf, Perry, and then Ryan in terms of points per game. And Trevor Zegras is still sitting at 747 right now. He's 8th all time.
So 08-09, obviously, Bobby Ryan is on the all-rookie team. He finishes second in the Calder Trophy that year. He plays from 20 to 25 with Anaheim. Then he gets traded in the 2013 summer to Ottawa, brings back Jacob Silfverberg and Stefan Noesen, and the pick that I believe ends up turning into Nick Ritchie. Because I think their pick is what they trade to.
I believe, it was.
Trade.
It was,
But he's a huge name, one of the most beloved players in Anaheim history. Fans still love him. You know what I mean? Like, we saw it when he was able to do the game the other night. Anaheim fans love Bobby Ryan, man. Like, he means a lot to the team. He was one of the biggest stars and the biggest faces on this team when it had a run of, legitimate success. He scored 30 goals 4 straight years in Anaheim. The only time he didn't score 30 goals in Anaheim, there wasn't a full season because of the lockout, or he played 23 games, which was his half a rookie year in 08. He is, to the extent that Peros is indicative of the bottom of the lineup fan favorite role player type, to the degree that Ruchin is indicative of the kind of underappreciated glue guy who does all the little things so the star can thrive. This is that second tier of star.
Yeah.
Right. This is, one of the best offensive players to come through Anaheim, period. Like, he at his peak, he was a phenomenal player. I have whatever issues I have with him because I'm dumb. As far as how beloved he was, what his impact in certain stupid shit like that was. But at the end of the day, man, Bobby Ryan kicked ass. He was a great player.
Yep.
He was a lot of fun to watch. He had that power move, and he left a lasting mark on Anaheim as a franchise and on the fan base.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that for sure.
And unless you want to retire number 54, sorry, buddy.
It's not.
You're gonna have to take the Ring of Honor.
The only other guys I thought of or considered, and then kind of pushed to the side because we're only picking 2 here, just because I didn't think there was enough there. The closest guy I had was Andy McDonald. For his impact and the seasons that he was in Anaheim and what he was able to do. Again, it's kind of that secondary star behind some of the top guys, right? He was the closest one I had. I looked at Sammy Paulson again just because of the how much the fans are enamored with his role and what his line did, and you talked about that with Rob Niedermayer as well. And then looking at some of the newer guys and just longevity and the roles that they played with this team, I looked at Silfverberg and Cogliano because of their roles as the kind of shutdown duo and trio with Ryan Kessler when they were here with the organization. And then I had mentioned to you before we recorded that the fact that Silfverberg is, I think, 5th in games played in franchise history, and he's got 6 more to pass. Who is in 4?
He's 6 right now. He's got 6. He's at 6'10". Steve Ruchin is at 6'16".
Right. Yeah. So again, longevity.
Assuming
he plays
he's not done.
Yeah.
He should pass Steve Ruchin sometime next year.
Yeah, even if he doesn't, again, 600 plus games with the franchise. The success, I guess, individually, there was always wanting more with Silfverberg, which I think hurts it a little bit. Everybody felt like he could be that guy because he was the main piece in the Bobby Ryan trade, and everybody always thought, okay, this guy has the shot and the skill to be a 30-goal scorer, and it kind of just never developed, or he was never utilized in that way. And I think that's what hurts him a little bit in terms of his perception. But when you break it down and look at the impact he's had over and the consistency he's had up until recently because of the injury problems, he has been one of the most impactful players for the Ducks over the last 5 to 10 years. With the role that he's played and how, when the Ducks were making long runs, how dominant that line was of Kessler, Cogliano, and Silfverberg and what they were able to do. There was nobody you could throw them against and they wouldn't be able to shut them down, right? You were not concerned that they wouldn't be able to do a job and get it done. That, I think, for me, is the most confident line I've ever had as a fan watching with the Ducks, where I'm like, yeah, okay, send them out in any situation, they'll get something done. Like I had no worries with that line, and I think that kind of perception and the longevity again Cogliano and Silverberg specifically had with this organization, Kessler would have if it wasn't for the injuries. I thought about those guys as guys you could include in this, but Ruchin and Peros and some of the other guys, Bobby Ryan that we'd mentioned, Rob Niedermayer, they kind of just edged it a little bit with the success and role they had. So
yeah, and I mean, look, it's essentially what we're doing is building like the inaugural class,
yeah,
right? Which is to one extent should be guys who are retired, which means Cogliano, Silverberg, Kessler, guys like that aren't technically in it. Bobby Ryan's not technically retired, but he's cooked. I think he's all but said that he's retired and everything, but like official paperwork.
Yeah.
I think the two guys you mentioned off the top were two guys I had pretty high on my list as far as Andy McDonald and Sammy Paulson. I think you can make a legitimate argument for Ryan Kessler, like you said. I think Saku Koivu had a meaningful role on this team for a significant enough amount of time that this is one of those ways to be like, this was like a great player who came through here. Like, it's not nothing that he got to play here. Like, this dude played in two places, and one of them is Montreal, and they love this guy.
Yeah, and it wasn't novelty either. It's not like he came here to not do anything. He was an impactful player when he was in Anaheim.
A very impactful player. It was him and Timu kind of trying to figure it all out behind Getzy for a long time. So yeah, I think those guys. I think you have fringe cases for guys like, maybe not quite. Maybe it's me being more personal, but like Chris Kunitz, I can see you making an argument for. Matt Bolesky, I can see you making an argument for. I'm sure there's some more forwards from the 90s that we're just not thinking of right now. But yeah, I think by and large, those are kind of the forwards that really had a meaningful impact on this team, either on or off the ice. And I do agree with you that Cogliano and Silverberg, of the guys who are still active, are probably the most likely forwards to be in this tier anytime soon.
On to defensemen.
Yeah,
you started off. Who do you got as your number one pick?
So this was the easiest pick for me. I knew this person was going to be one of my picks automatically, and it's Ruslan Saleh. I fucking love Ruslan Saleh. Ruslan Saleh, I'm sure I've talked about it before. He was my first favorite non-star Ducks player. I went and looked it up because it's the house that Rusty built, right? And that's because of his Game 4 overtime winner against New Jersey in the 03 finals, right? He had that huge goal off the faceoff. I think the puck just kind of drops back. He just smashed it. If I'm being completely honest with you, I do not have a ton of snapshot video memory of Soleil doing this, Soleil doing that. I just have this overwhelming memory of emotion, essentially, of every time I saw him, he made me happy. He was fighting. He was getting penalties. He was, he did not have as many points as I would have thought he did as a kid, just because of how much I loved him and how much it felt like he was always involved. I would love to see what some of his advanced numbers were if we had that kind of information. I just think he meant a lot to this franchise when I was a kid watching this team. He played with the team from 99 to 06. He was a big part of this team for a long time. He played with them longer than that, but 99 is when they started doing time on ice, because from 99 to 06 he was 24 to 31. He averaged 22 minutes a night. That's the heart of his career, and he's putting up 22 minutes a night. So he was a big part of this team. He killed penalties. He was on probably the second power play. He was and I just remember loving him. Just absolutely loving the way he played and everything about his game. So for me, he was a really just a lock for me. I think, I've jokingly made the claim that they should hang his number, and it's only half a joke, because I do think he was one of the first other guys that made a real difference for this team. So
no, he was. I had two guys for defensemen. where I felt like this was an easy conversation. Both of them were locks. I had some other guys that I thought, deserved it and could be, but these two guys, Soleil and the guy that I'm going to mention next, are the two guys I was like, yeah, for sure. Like, if anybody, I think if you ask most people, they would say it was these two guys, and the guy I had was Francois Beauchemin. For a lot of the same reasons, again, for Ruslan Soleil, just the next era after him, right? And being that shutdown defenseman, the guy who kind of carried the load that way, penalty kill, got things done, was a leader on the team. Their kind of history matches up pretty similar in the fact that they're almost, I think they're 4 games apart, games played apart. Yeah, 2. So Ruslan Soleil, second most games played of any defenseman in franchise history. Beauchemin's third, Fowler's first.
Right.
For anybody wondering, 10 seasons with the Ducks for Beauchemin, 9 with the Ducks for Soleil. Soleil, 6th most PIMs in franchise history, and then for Beauchemin, a little bit more on the point side with fourth in goals and points among defensemen in franchise history. Only Fowler, Niedermayer, and Lindholm are in front of him. Now, the Ducks haven't had a lot of defensemen who've stuck around for 500-plus games who were guys who put up a ton of points. Really, only Fowler and Niedermayer, I guess you could classify as those guys, but he always just kind of chipped in for the important goal every now and then, right? And was a big part of that Stanley Cup winning team behind Niedermayer and Pronger as that kind of next option, right? And I think for everything he's done for the organization, the fact that he had 2 stints, left, came back, and was just as impactful when he came back as well. Sorry, 3 stints, right? With the team. Every time he came back, everybody loved him. He still was an impactful player. He played his role the right way, was a leader with this team. I think for a lot of the reasons you said for Soleil as well, like I think him and Beauchemin just kind of made sense for this, where you could make a case, I think, with either of them, just with Ruchin as them potentially, if you wanted to, again, load up on the rafters, that they could potentially get their names up there. But for this, they are front and center, 100% locks. Like again, the easiest 3 names I picked on here were Ruchin, Soleil, and Beauchemin. It was right off the bat. Like those are the 3 guys that have to get in.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think Frankie's a wonderful pick. I mean, look, he's got the fight with Iginla as one of those, just like non-Ducks fans remember that fight with Iginla from the playoffs. Like it rocked. Like I just think, he played for, like, he spent a ton of time as basically being the training wheels for like every young Ducks defender to come through for like 4 years. Yeah. He played with young Fowler. He played with young Lindholm.
Theodore, I think, at some point too.
Yeah, I was gonna say
Montour,
he probably played with
Theodore.
Yeah. Like he was just such a steady presence, and it's so funny to me that he has 2 less games and half as much penalty minutes, but also almost twice as many points.
Yeah.
Nothing proves to me how much my love of Ruslan Soleil changes like my memory of him, just like as far as like production, because like I felt like he scored more than that, like than the fact that Francois Beauchemin almost doubled him in basically the same games. And it's just like, that shouldn't be possible. But, at the same time, Francois Beauchemin played with, overall, I would say, far better talent on average, right? The qualities of the rosters, which is reflected in the fact that he probably had the more successful runs. It is really funny, too, if you look at it, because Soleil got to the team in 97 and left in 06. Frankie's first year was 06, and his last year was 18. So they kind of cover what is, roughly the most successful eras in Anaheim history, and certainly the 2 most prominent eras in Anaheim history. I 100% agree with you that those 2 guys are just easy locks. Like, to me, you could make a legitimate case that Ruchin, Niedermayer, Ryan, and these 2 guys is your first group to go in.
Yep.
And I don't think anybody would argue with you.
No.
So just out of curiosity, who was your other, I know you said that these were your 2 locks, but who was somebody else that you thought about for this?
I thought about Chris Pronger because of the impact, obviously, he had with this team. It's the 2nd most games played with any other franchise in history other than the team that retired his jersey in St. Louis. He played 500-plus games in St. Louis, 220 games with the Ducks. His production over that time, I think it was 150 points in 220 games, 30 points in 38 playoff games with the Ducks. It's just like the right prime eras of his career were spent in Anaheim and ultimately resulted in a Stanley Cup. And I don't think they do it without him. I think the impact he had while the impact he had while he was in Anaheim is the main reason he deserves to have a spot. I think Soleil and Beauchemin beat him on longevity and being with the team for as long as they were. But in terms of individual impact and the ability to kind of individually lead a team to a championship, I think Pronger gets in there because of that. He was my next kind of, if you want to have a lock, the only reservation again is Jersey is retired in St. Louis. The peak, the most success he had in terms of games played and points and everything, and what people remember him for is his time in St. Louis. So that was my only reservation on why he came third. I also thought about Oleg Tverdovsky as well, but he would have been a distant fourth, I think, behind these guys. Did you have anybody else?
So I kind of didn't, just because I wasn't sure who you were going to pick.
Yeah.
And I just kind of wanted to leave it open. But I think Chris Pronger I think everything you said about Chris Pronger is right. I think it's hard to have a bigger impact in 220 games than Chris Pronger did in Anaheim. He was a second-team postseason All-Star the year they won the Cup. He got Hart votes. He was third in the Norris voting the year they won the Cup. Like, this is 32-year-old Chris Pronger. And just in case there were any questions about how bad a man this dude was, from 35 to 37, he was with Philadelphia. And that 2009-2010 year, his first year in Philly, he dragged their asses basically by himself to the fucking playoffs. To the finals. Yeah, it was,
And they lost to a dynasty
Mike
team.
Richards. Yeah, they lost to, exactly. And then for some reason, Philly was like, what if we, well, I know why, but like still, they were just like, what if we just send everybody to the four corners of the world and then languish in obscurity forever?
Which was exactly what they're doing right now.
Fuck, man. We might have to do a diagnostic episode on those cats. But yeah, exactly like you said, the bulk of his career, the most meaningful part of his career was absolutely in St. Louis. I think Anaheim is, as silly as it seems, I think the closest comparable that I can think of, and thank God Chris Pronger is so good, otherwise I would sound like such an asshole, but is Ray Bourque when he moved to Denver and he got that cup, right? Ray Bourque's the Boston guy. Like, I don't think, nobody has any thoughts against that. It's that. But like everybody, literally everybody was so happy when he finally got that cup, and he did it in Denver.
Yeah. And
it was awesome. And I feel that Anaheim is that for Pronger. He had the run to the finals in 2006 with Edmonton, where they lost to the Carolina. And then he basically tells them, I'm not doing this shit anymore. Get me out of here. Comes to Anaheim, plays for 3 seasons, and dominates, man, and just creates, there are not a lot of blue lines that had two better defensemen at the same time than the Ducks did when they had Pronger and Niedermayer together. And neither of which was at the height of their powers. I think both of them were on the other side of 30, and they were still dominant players. So I'm with you there. As far as fringe cases, I think you could make a fringe case for someone like Keith Carney, who was a pretty steady kind of guy. I think you can make a decent case for possibly someone like Nick Havlid. For me personally, the guy that I would love to give a little bit more love to would be Sheldon Brookbank, but he just didn't play enough games. But he was a big part of the team when he was there. He was a very steady presence. He was one of the guys on the team that stepped up a lot for other guys and, threw them around a lot. But like, I don't think he ever got enough credit for being as smart of a player as he was. Like, he left Anaheim, went to Chicago, retired, and joined the bench basically immediately.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And like, again, other context notwithstanding, Joe Quenneville is the one who like looked at Sheldon Brookbank and was like, "No, you're smart. You can stand over here."
Yeah.
So that means something. But again, I think his style of play is kind of indicative of what Anaheim fans for a long time loved, right? With that really heavy hockey, that really physical hockey, that tough-nosed, just literally punch you in the face hockey. And I think a lot of that comes from being a young franchise, having a chip on your shoulder, being the second Southern California team. LA is just LA, right? They had Gretzky. They're also the second biggest market in the world or in this country. So you can't get away from all of that. And then, I just think he had a chip on his shoulder in the way a lot of Ducks fans did. And he played a very, very heavy style and it rocked. You know what I mean? The guys like that have always kind of had, managed to find a special place in the hearts of Anaheim fans.
The thing I love about this is the guys we have in here show you how the Ducks played for 10, 15, 20 years. Like Boschman, Soleil, Pronger to some extent, Ruchin, Perros, and Rob Niedermeyer. The only skill guy I guess we've included is Bobby Ryan, if you want to call it that. But it does show you, and that's the kind of the point we mentioned of this is to show you the impactful players, and it kind of paints a picture of how the team was and how they played and how these guys, why they meant so much to these teams over the years. But we got to wrap this up with goalies. Now, I went into this thinking it was going to be a simple one of two guys. It sounds like you have some more options. I'll lead off with this. I was going to include one guy, but similar to my Perry conversation, I feel like one of these guys has a better chance to get their name up in the rafters eventually. If there's this buffer time. Now, it might not be with Getzlaf retiring now, where Getzlaf could literally get his jersey up in a couple of years. So this might eliminate that a little bit.
He could get it up in a couple of months.
Yeah, depending on how early they want to do it.
Calls and says, okay, wait, I want to come back, which I don't think he's going to do. I'm not 100% sure we get to the next draft and his jersey isn't in the rafters.
Yeah, and then Perry, depending on how long he continues to play, he would be next. So Giguère was the guy I was going to pick. I think he has the best chance, despite, not being my pick in Ring of Honor, I think he has the best chance of getting his name up in the rafters because of the success he had with the organization, winning the Stanley Cup, dragging the team there, dragging them there to a final against the New Jersey Devils, right? Like, just doing that and the success and the impact he had on this organization as an individual, I feel like he has the best chance. Now, if he doesn't, he's my first pick for this. If he doesn't get his name in the rafters, he's my first pick for the Ring of Honor. However, the next one for me is Guy Hebert. First Duck, franchise leader in games played, wins for goaltenders. Again, the success is not necessarily there. It's tough to do that, I guess, in the early years of the franchise as well. But I think, again, and there's something to be said about the fact he's still with the organization. I know it's in a broadcast role, whatever, but
it doesn't mean nothing.
Yeah, it doesn't mean, yeah, exactly. So I think for me it was a toss-up between the two. The success and the individual success that Giguère had with the Ducks is what put him over the top for me. But I do think there is a slight shout potentially for him to get the number up in the rafters. If the Ducks want to have a goalie up there, I don't think that's the best reason to do it. But beyond Perry and Getzlaf, he's my next guy. If somebody's going to get their jersey retired right now for the Ducks, it's Getzlaf, Perry, Giguère, right? So I think that's what took him off my list. So Guy Hebert is my guy as that technicality.
Yeah, I think those two guys make a lot of sense, right? I think, you can't tell the history of Anaheim without those two guys. Again, Jean-Sébastien Giguère presents an incredibly interesting case when looking at where the lines are for where the lines are for jersey retirements, how much longevity and impact and how high of a high do you have to get there, right? Like, there's only 4 goalies in Anaheim's history who have played over 300 games. Coincidentally, those are the same goalies who have over 100 wins. They all have over 150. Jonas Hiller is 4th with 326 games on 162 wins. Gibby is third, 378 games, 166 wins. Guy Hebert, 441, 173 wins. Jean-Sebastien, games played leader, 447 games played, 206 wins. John Gibson, to me, will ultimately be the best goalie to have played in Anaheim. I think it's also fair to say that Jean-Sebastien Seguin deserves to be the goalie up if, like you said, you want to have somebody up there. I said to you before we started that I think that there are three guys. I think leaving out Jonas Hiller is a mistake. I think Jonas Hiller deserves to be in this Ring of Honor conversation, because there was a long time where Jonas Hiller was really the only thing that kind of helped make this team anywhere close to competitive. And it's remarkable to me that he only got Vezina votes in 1 year. And we know the vertigo completely derailed his career. He started 72 games in 2011, 2012. You know what I mean? Like, he was just such an important player. He was so much fun to watch play. Jonas Hiller, I think, is the guy that you would make the case for. If not, then I think like you said, Jaguar, like for the Ring of Honor, if you can leave Jaguar out for a second, I think Hebert is the first goalie that goes into the Ring of Honor.
Yeah.
And now that you've got him there, you've given him his propers, you've given him the love that he clearly deserves. Then you can have the conversation about what do you do with Jaguar. Does he go up? He's got the Conn Smythe. He's got the Stanley Cup. He's got the moment with Solani, all that stuff.
Yeah.
But once you get Hebert into that Ring of Honor, I think it kind of helps settle that whole thing down.
Yeah.
Because I think if you put Jaguar up before you get Hebert some more love for what he's done, I do think it's a little rough. But yeah, I think those are the three guys. I think Hiller, Hebert, and Jaguar have a legitimate case that they should be Ring of Honor players, and obviously Jaguar has a case that he should go up. I think, like you said, he's the closest to a next guy. I think you have to put him in over Soleil. I think you have to put him in over Pronger, over, Andy McDonald or Rob Niedermeyer. Or, again, none of these guys have a shot to go up, which is my point, I guess. So, yeah, I think those are the guys. I think, I guess.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I guess we can say that we have kind of settled on a 6-man lineup to go into the Anaheim Ducks first Ring of Honor. So the forwards would be Ruchin, Niedermeyer, and Ryan.
Mm-hmm.
The defensemen would be Frankie and Soleil.
Yep.
And Hebert would be the goalie.
Yeah.
Now, here's a question real quick. Is there a coach that you would put into the Ring of Honor?
Yeah, this was interesting. It's tough. I think you have to say Randy, right? Like you kind of have to, even though the second stint wasn't as great as the first. But the Stanley Cup, right? For me, it comes down to the success,
Right.
And I feel like you can't have. Randy was there for a lot more than just the Stanley Cup. But at the end of the day, the coach who goes in there should be the one who's stuck around with the franchise the longest, who's coached the most games, and has had the most success. And as much as we've had our issues with Randy, he's the guy, right? Like, he is the coach that goes in there. Like, there are other options you could think of if you want to put a second one in after there. I don't know if there is even... Maybe Bruce would be the second one you could
For
think.
me, it's Ron Wilson.
Yeah.
For me,
Mm-hmm.
it is Ron Wilson is the guy that I would look at if you were going to put somebody else in.
Yeah. Yeah, I think those are the only two. I think it's
Yeah.
Randy, and then you could Bruce or Ron. And that's it. I don't think, again, Babcock, his success was elsewhere, didn't have a ton of time in Anaheim. Anybody else that's been there, there's just not enough of an argument to really say. And Bruce had the success in the regular season and took the Ducks far, but ultimately didn't get over the hump. And then for Ron Wilson, what he did in the early years for the Ducks, there's something to be said about how valuable that was, right? So I think there are two different cases of a coach having to come in and take over that team from the beginning and, lead a very young, just put together from the expansion draft to...
I mean, we saw how important that was with Gerard Gallant, and nothing has shown how much more important that is than how fucking much Dave Haxtell sucks.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, you know what I mean? Like, to the extent that to the point that you're making about how important a head coach can be early on, like, we have two very easy examples to juxtapose against each other. Like, Dave Haxtell, so even if you want to say he didn't do an actively bad job, Dave Haxtell was a borderline non-figure this year. And that's on a team that didn't have any stars. I like guys on that Seattle team. They don't have any stars. Gerard Gallant and Marc-Andre Fleury and then William Karlsson were the heart of that Vegas team. Those were the three guys coming out of that first year where you're like, oh, that's the franchise. Then they made all these other all the other stuff that happened after. But out of that first year, early on, like, I don't think you could say there was anyone more important than Gerard Gallant, with the exception of Marc-Andre Fleury.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think when you get into that discussion outside of Randy between Ron and Bruce, it is, what do you value most at that point? Do you value what he had to do and how he led that team in a tough time in terms of Ron, or do you value the success that Bruce had despite not being able to get it done in the playoffs and get you to the Stanley Cup final and get you the Stanley Cup, right? So it is tough because it's success, but not the Randy level of success of winning versus dragging a team through the mud and still getting some level of success out of them and getting the best out of young players like Paul Kariya, right? So it is tough. Now, the one thing I wanted to get to quickly before we move on for all this, with the Jaguar Rafters talk, I had an interesting comparison on whether Jaguar should be in the Rafters.
I'm excited.
Do you think Tim Thomas deserves to be in the Rafters for the Boston Bruins?
Fuck no.
Okay. So I feel like they have very similar levels of success at a certain age with their teams in terms of dragging their teams to Stanley Cup champions. Fairly similar wins, games played, totals, regular season success. Thomas's regular season save percentage and numbers are a little bit better than Jiggy's, but Boston was also a powerhouse at that time as well. So that was my I think my closest comparison off the top of my head I could come up with is if Jiggy deserves it, or does Tim Thomas deserve it, because they arguably did kind of the same thing, right?
I guess, yeah. Like, are you saying that Tim Thomas's time in Boston and Jaguar's time in Anaheim, the total games played are similar?
Yeah. So Jaguar played 447. Thomas played 378.
Okay.
In Boston.
Do me a favor, look up Chris Osgood's Detroit numbers, because that's the one to me that gets the closest to Jaguar. Which is interesting because I feel like he splits the difference, because I think Tim Thomas was a better goaltender than Jaguar. I don't think you can argue that.
Yeah. So,
but
Chris
Jaguar.
Chris Osgood won 2 Stanley Cups with Detroit. I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so for Chris Osgood, 565 games played, 317 wins with the Red Wings. 905 save percentage over that time. Very interesting. 110 playoff games, 2 Stanley Cups, 2 of which he has technically 3 Stanley Cups, but the first one he only played 2 games. So the other 2 are the ones he led the team to success. 918 save percentage in 22 games played in the first one, 930 save percentage in 19 games in the next one. In the season after that, he led them back to the Cup final where they lost with a 926 save percentage. So was 1 game short. They won 15. He won 15 games that year. I think it was against Pittsburgh, I believe. So, yeah.
Yeah, I
it's
just
a pretty
think,
good comparison as well, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. The Jaguar parallels question is super interesting because, like, is he kind of, like, I guess, in terms of, like, impact relative to team success, is he kind of Bobrovsky and Columbus-ish? Like, obviously, Bobrovsky has multiple Vezinas, so that puts him ahead in that sense. But I also think Jaguar was on teams that were not the most successful, despite how well he played, and the same for Bobrovsky with Columbus.
Yeah, I think Osgood and Thomas are very good comparisons to Jaguar. I think the only leg up I'd give Jaguar, and maybe it's not fair, is the history of those other two teams. The other goaltenders they've had there. Yes, Osgood, 2 Stanley Cups, 2 of them he led the team to, so that's something to be said for sure. And I think a lot of Red Wings fans argue he probably should be up there, and maybe he eventually will. And the same argument, again, goes for Tim Thomas in Boston. So a lot of great goaltenders before him. They've had good goaltenders after him. He led them to that Stanley Cup. He was good when he was there. But the history of goaltenders before him and the history of that team, the number of jerseys that they've got retired, and the stature of the players that have been retired there, it doesn't line up, right? Like, so their level of Ring of Honor, I think, is different than when we're talking about the Ducks
for sure.
Because of the names that are up in the rafters there. It's hard to put somebody up there when you have Bobby Orr up there. You have Yzerman or guys like that up in the rafters. You're like, okay, like it's not the same level to some extent. So I think in that case it works a little bit for Jaguar, where he's clearly the best right now, the best goaltender in franchise history in terms of success and everything, right? So it makes sense where he could go up there because he is. Where Osgood is not the best goaltender in franchise history for the Red Wings, and Thomas isn't the best goaltender in franchise history for the Bruins. I think that's what works against them. So it is a tough. I don't know if there really is a direct comparison then in that sense of somebody who has the similar numbers and similar success, 1 or 2 Stanley Cups, 400, 500 plus games, decent regular season numbers, but still being the franchise's best goaltender. I'd be interested to see if we could look at some of the, the younger teams, if you want to call it that, and see if anybody really compares. But I don't know.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one, I guess. And again, see, like, it's weird because, like, all the examples that I can think of that feel similar to the way Jaguar had an impact on those Ducks teams, I think are, inarguably a tier or two ahead of where Jaguar is. Because the two that came to mind for me are Lundqvist and Price. Those guys are both better, than Jaguar. But as far as being the guy that takes their team as far as they can possibly fucking go on their own, like, those two dudes, like, are right up there.
Yeah.
And it's even funnier, I guess, that Lundqvist in New York loses to LA, and then Jaguar in Anaheim loses to New Jersey. That's funny to me. It's the same thing, but different, New Jersey, the Orange County of New York.
Yeah, really.
I wonder who's going to be more mad at me for that. New Jersey people or Ducks people?
Ducks people.
Ducks people. Because New Jersey people won't ever hear me.
I think New Jersey people hearing that they're the Orange County of New York is a compliment to them than what they normally hear.
Well, hey, that might be true. Yeah. But yeah, so it's an interesting thing. I think the idea of, like, comparatives and context and stuff like that, because, like, with Boston, like, I would have a hard time retiring Tim Thomas's number over Tuukka Rask's number.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like, it's Tuukka Rask. Like, that's the guy of, the last 20 years of, like, who's the best? Fucking Tuukka Rask. He's incredible.
Yeah.
Like, the peak of what Tim Thomas was able to achieve for a couple years was incredible. But as far as, like, consistency, longevity, Tuukka Rask overwhelmingly has been one of the most underappreciated goalies for 15 years.
Yeah. No, the regular season numbers are better. In playoffs, roughly the same success, right? How many cups did Rask? Did he have one? One, right?
He was one as the backup behind Tim Thomas.
Okay,
but he took them to
within one game and within 2 games back in 2012, 2013, and 2018, 2019. And his numbers, like, he dragged him there. 934 save percentage in 2018-19, a 940 save percentage in 2012-2013 with 14 wins. That's unbelievable.
That's the year they lost to Chicago?
I think so, 2012-2013. Yeah, it sounds about the year that Chicago was cooking. So, yeah, no, he's...
Boston won 11. Chicago won 12. No, New York, the Kings won 12. Chicago won 13. Kings won 14. Chicago won 15. Yeah, that sounds right.
Mm-hmm.
And then it went Penguins, Capitals, then St. Louis, Tampa.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, okay.
But yeah, I mean, I think he has a better case than those guys. It's a hard comparable, but yeah, to wrap that up, I think if I had to pick somebody out of Getzlaf and Perry who deserves their number retired, it's probably Giguère. And it makes sense if you want to, like, again, if you're going to have a goaltender, and I think, Gibson will make a case depending on how long he sticks around in Anaheim, but for the next 10 years, there's going to be nobody else, right? Mm-hmm. You've got to build it up. You got to find somebody who's going to play 400, 500, 600 games here before you even get to that conversation again. At some point, after Getzlaf and Perry, there's not going to be anybody for a while. And if you're going to want to retire somebody, if anybody's going to make sense, I think it's Giguère.
Yeah, and the truth of the matter is there is exactly one player on the team right now that you're like, if everything stays roughly the way it is, they've got an outside shot. And it's Cam Fowler.
Yep.
That's it. That's the only other guy on the team right now that's going to have a shot. Lindholm and Manson, I think, ultimately are Ring of Honor level players.
Yeah. They would have had to stay longer for them to get to that point.
Raquel, same thing. Ring of Honor-ish level player. Like, maybe not even, because it feels like it was really only 2 great seasons out of him.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Fowler's going to get to 1,000 games played. He's going to lead all defensemen in franchise history in all categories. Like, there will be no question, I think, at that point where when you've done that, despite him not being, Niedermayer level player, when you finish your career, been here for that long, you lead in all those categories, you have to. Like, I think when we get to that point in, 5 years or so, when we're looking at Fowler's career and having that argument, it's going to feel like a no-brainer at that point. If he sticks around and is the leader in all those categories, you just kind of have to at that point, right? So,
real quick, this will be the last question, then we'll get the hell out of here. Relative to position, right? To the other people at their position at the time that they're playing.
Yep.
Is Cam Fowler better or worse than Giguère?
That's tough.
And I know that's hard because there's, 6 times 30 fucking defensemen and 2 maybe.
Again, just in terms of like their impact on the team when they were there, kind of thing?
Relative to like other defensemen, other goalies out there, how they played for the team. Wow. Is Cam Fowler better relative to defensemen than Giguère was relative to goalies?
Ah, man.
That's a hard question.
That's so hard. Again, Giguère, the success is something. But I think we do severely underrate and undervalue the impact that Cam Fowler's had on the Ducks' long playoff runs. I mean, you don't know for sure. No. But I think the fan base as a whole, Lindholm was the guy, right? Lindholm was the guy and for the longest time. I think, and for good reason. But Fowler has been an impactful player. And with Lindholm and everybody gone, he's taken that. Now he's the guy, right? So
yeah, he is.
It's so tough. I mean, like if you're comparing it to other defensemen on the team and other defensemen in the league, he doesn't quite stack up to that. But at the end of the day, my thing with Fowler is the numbers he's put up with this franchise will speak for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what will put him ultimately over the edge, I think, compared to Giguère, just because he will have those statistics. And again, all of that is due to longevity and being here as long as he has. It doesn't mean he's a significantly better player than Giguère in relative, but it's just he'll have those. Like he already has most of them now to begin with. And I'm not even, off the top of my head, he might be. I can't remember if he was the points leader in franchise history among defensemen this year. I can't remember if he did that. So so he might already have all those now. Like, and it doesn't even matter.
Oh, that's what I wanted to ask you. The actual last question before the next last question. Do you think Cam Fowler puts on another jersey before he retires?
Oh, man. Well, how old is he now?
29?
He's 30, going to turn 31 in December.
Fuck off, he is not.
Yeah, he's 30. Birthday's December 5th, so he'll be 31 in December. And he's got what?
How are we only? Oh, I don't like that. I'm sorry, Cam, for everything I've ever said.
And how many years does he have left? Let's see.
4, 5, 4.
I gotta check because this is.
No, it might be 5. I think him and are on the same deal basically.
This year, next year, the year after, and so 4 this season, and then 3 seasons past that.
Okay, and then Gibby
will be
this year and 4 more.
34. So he'll be 34 at the end of his contract. Will turn 35 in that next season if he was to resign.
And he'll have been playing since he was 18.
That's such a very tough endpoint to the contract, right? Because it depends on how he's playing at that point. If the Ducks aren't good, or even if they are and he's not good, and they want to, it's so tough to tell what they'll do at that point, because he could still go somewhere for 2 or 3 years,
Absolutely,
and try and win a cup, or the Ducks could move on from him because he's not playing well and he's just kind of sticking around the NHL. That I don't think it will affect his legacy, but yeah, if he's going to spend I don't know if he'll spend the rest of his career in Anaheim. I think it's a toss up, and it depends on 2 things. Like all of it does is, are the Ducks good, and is he still good? And do those line up? Because if he's still good and the Ducks are good, I think they'll keep him around. But if the Ducks are good and he's
sure
not,
well, yeah, okay. So
I would hope to God they are good in 5 years, because that would be rough.
Yeah, my question was more of like when his contract is up, that's when I expect Anaheim to have become a second round playoff team, right? Like 3 years from now, I would like to hope they can make a second round, right? And again, there's so many parts of that. Obviously, Toronto's an incredible team, and I'm not even trying to be funny about it. So there's so many different things, but we did see Florida this year take that step.
Yeah.
And their guys are a fair amount older. It took them a little longer to get the rest of the team around them, but still, I could see the team going to him and being like, do you want the bridge deal we gave you when you were a kid, and giving him 3 or 4x4 and having him be the 4th defenseman, you know what I mean? And kind of be a Francois Beauchemin like-ish role player for the team, as his age. Because again, he's a fucking incredible skater. Yeah. So to me, if you're Anaheim, you're basically hoping he becomes Brian Campbell. And he's just a good enough skater for so long, and he's smart enough that as long as he takes care of himself, he can be a useful player.
Yeah. Yeah. It's such a tough cutoff point at 34 turning 35, right?
Right.
Because he's not he's not Chara, where you're like, yeah, this guy could play for 40 years because he's big, he stays in shape, and he has a simple game. Shuts you down, he uses his size, and that's it. You could see him playing until he's 45. Like, it just makes sense. With Cam, it's like you said, so much of his game relies on skating. If him being good at 34, 35 depends on if that's still intact at that point. If he's still up to speed with the rest of
See,
the
to
game.
me, I think because his skating is so good and because he is smart, I do think he has the opportunity to play till he's 40.
Yeah, I think he does too. I think he will still be good at 34, 35. I think the style of his game and how smart he is out on the ice, I think there's enough there to say that he could still be an impactful player. How the game is going, yeah. Yeah, and I think he's a good player to have around at that point. When you're when you're looking at veterans on this team, we're talking about guys who could be the next captain. He's near the top of that list, right? In that you're gonna need some of these guys that have been around and know the organization for as long as they have, and have learned things from over a longer period of time than 1 or 2 seasons, from guys like Ryan Getzlaf and Teemu Selanne and Corey Perry. And right now, he's the only guy that projects to be that type of player. To be that guy. So I think
until we bring in Stanley Cup champions Andre Palat and Valeri Nichushkin, right?
Yeah, and Stanley Cup champion 2-time Stanley Cup champion Corey Perry comes back. So, but I mean, I think he does. I think he sticks around when that contract's up. But it does depend on his level of play at that point and where the Ducks are, and hopefully not still in a rebuild.
Those classic 2 minor details about a contract. Are you good? Are they good?
Yeah.
Does it make sense? Yeah. So, yeah. All right. Well, we should get the hell out of here. You were supposed to be done an hour ago.
We always end up extending. That's how these usually go. So, but yeah, that was a fun show we've been waiting a while to do. So it's nice to finally get that one done. We're going to have a bunch of different stuff throughout the summer, whether it's specifically Ducks related or just hockey related or whatever. Like, we're just going to, when the draft is over, when free agency kind of dies down a bit, we've got some plans to kind of just do whatever in the summer, pump out some shows and kind of talk about whatever we want. So that will be coming up after, obviously, the hockey stuff dies down. But in the meantime, I know we have a few more ideas we've discussed that we're going to work on and have ready just in case interviews fall apart or whatever, and draft shows don't go as planned that we've got set up. But as for specific scheduled Ducks content, we do have our draft preview at some point. We're just working on finding a guest that is able to hop on when we're able to hop on, and bang out a show and get that up. But we still got some time, so we're hoping to do one, if not two of those, when we can schedule them. And then after the draft, we'll have our little draft recap show, and then looking ahead to free agency, and then hoping to get the boys back on too. Hoping to get
we got Jay.
Got Jay once, and
He wandered out.
He wandered back on for a bit, and we're hoping to get Pat back on. He's working on it, so whether that's, I doubt, for the draft preview, but a Pucks and Brews style show or something like that.
Yeah, maybe we'll do some kind of post-draft season wrap-up or something, and we'll make sure to get Patty on here to give us all the hot takes he's been holding in.
What was the thing the other day that Jay was saying that I did something to do with Canada that I didn't tell him about, that he was saying would be a great Ask a Canadian thing? I can't remember now. I'll have to go back in the chat, but that would be... Surprisingly, did not have to do with bagged milk this time, so...
No. Oh, no, it did. It absolutely did. He didn't know there was like a Canadian dairy committee or something.
Oh, yeah.
It actually was still about bagged milk.
So it always seems to come back to bagged milk. But yeah, we'll get those guys on to do a fun show like that, because we're not holding them hostage, we swear. Right? We're hoping they can get back on soon. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this one. It was a lot of fun for us to put together, and we'll be back soon with some more shows.
Bye, everybody.